In recent videos, we've looked at the way Access actually stores dates with the time in tables, and we looked at some of the formatting you can apply to those dates in order to create a specific display appearance or a display format for use in other places like in forms and reports. So today we're going to look at an example of that formatting applied to a form. This form is based on my own personal customer time and billing application where I track customers and work that I have done for those customers. You'll notice that I have obscured the names of those customers and the work I have done for them in order to protect their confidentiality. And I've also obscured those names so that they're not, or dimmed them out, I should say, so that they're not as, they don't distract from what we're really focused on, and that is the dates and times. This particular project that I picked to start with began on October 3rd, 2012. It was originally due December 31st, 2012, and it looks like I actually marked it as complete on December 31st, 2013, a year later. Now, I don't know if that's because I just took that much longer than I anticipated, or if I overlooked the completion date at the time and had to go back and fill it later. But the important thing is we have three dates: the start date, due date, and completion date, all in the standard US format, month, day, and year. I applied one format here in order to indicate that you can use that formatting to do things like group. Here, we're in a form, we're not doing grouping like we would do perhaps in a report. But you can see that if you wanted to group work done by month, October 2012, December 2012, January 2013, and so on, you can apply display formatting to the dates and group them by that formatted date. And again, that's only for display purposes because this date is exactly the same as this date in the table from which it's drawn. In the two subforms below, I have the work done for this particular project. The top one has the unformatted date and time fields exactly as they were saved into the table. In the lower subform, I have applied formatting to those exact same dates and times in order to improve the appearance of the dates and times, and also to save some space. And as you can see, by applying formatting, we can save approximately that much overall space. Depending on how much is going on in a form, that much savings can be significant. In the first subform again, the date I started work on this particular effort was October 3rd, the same day as the start date, at approximately 8:37 p.m. I actually started work at 6 o'clock, so it looks to me like what happened here, going back, I don't remember, is that I started work at 6 p.m. and then realized that I needed to actually record that work, so I went in, created the work detail at 8:13, and that was approximately the same time when I marked that I had completed the work. I bill in 15-minute increments, so this 8:13 would be rounded to 8:15. If you go back to the beginning, you can see, well, you can't see it here because these are the work dates, but it evens out over time by rounding to 15 minutes. Sometimes it goes forward, sometimes back, so it all works out overall. At least that's the hope. I used a calculation here to calculate the number of minutes I worked, and then another calculation to convert that to the hours worked. And I only track billable work, so this is mostly just here for completeness. If we look at the lower form, we can see that by formatting this so that it displays only the short date format, which is one of the built-in Access formats, I get the month, day, and year, and all of these are much easier to read, to recognize, because we don't have the distraction of the time element, which is kind of irrelevant in terms of the date on which the work was done. The start time is more relevant, and the stop time, of course, is relevant. Notice that by applying formatting, I can shorten this down slightly, save a little bit of space, and make it a little easier to, in my mind, a little easier to read, because the seconds are kind of, again, irrelevant in terms of the amount of work done. The same calculations are applied to determine the number of minutes worked, and then a second calculation to convert that to the number of hours worked. And you can see, we just scroll down and we see, actually it looks like I came back even after I had marked that work complete and did a couple of more small amounts of work on this project, and I would have to go back, of course, and look at to see what those represent. But even though I marked it complete the 2013th, it turns out that I had to come back later and add another hour and a half here. And apparently that particular work effort was less than 15 minutes because it didn't record the time. And again, this is where that offset works out. By rounding to 15 minutes overall, I end up with roughly the same amount of time, except it's easier to track this way. So this is an example of applying formatting to the label, not necessarily to the data itself, in order to save space. And as you can see, formatting is also applicable to control labels as well as to the control values themselves. So I think of those as complementary. Let's look now at the formatting used in each of these controls to see how it worked out. So this one is the start month and year, and I'm going to bring the property sheet over so you can see how that was done. The control source is the start date, again, the same as the start date here, with specific formatting applied. The way we do that is to say control source is equal to format, start date. The three M's mean the abbreviation, the three-letter abbreviation for the month, the name of the month, and then the four-digit year. Due date, formatted due date. And again, exactly the same thing. The control source is equal to the due date, formatted as three-character abbreviation for the month name, four-digit year, complete date, the same. Let's pop out this subform and look at this one. All right. We haven't really talked about date logic yet. So right now I'm only going to mention it, and I'll come back in a later video and dive more deeply into the date logic that is used here. What we said was we want to know the number of minutes worked between the start time and the stop time. The date diff function gives us that information, N is the operator for minutes. So we're going to show the date difference in minutes between the start time and the stop time. Hours worked we can calculate by getting the number of minutes and then dividing that by 60. And that will give us the number of hours worked. In addition to that, I can apply formatting to that number. I haven't done it here, and I won't do that. We'll come back later when we talk in more detail about date logic and look at formatting in more detail. That's the unformatted version. Get this out of the way. And now let's look at the formatted version. Bring back in. So this time I applied the built-in access short date format to convert the work date, which included the date and time, as you saw in the unformatted version. We formatted the start time as median time, the stop time as medium time, and then the date diff functions again, divided by 60. This case, we did apply one additional piece of formatting, one additional format function, standard, which is going to convert numbers into the decimal equivalent with the 1,000 operator. And I said I want to see 2 decimal places in the result. So we'll close that, move this out of the way, go back and look at those dates again, and you can see the results of applying short date format removes the time element. Using the medium time removes the seconds. Formatting here is simply the column heading, but by applying the standard format with 2 decimal places, we regularize the appearance of these so that they all appear the same number of decimals to the right. If it has a fractional value, it appears. If it's an even hour, then we get the zeros. So these all line up and appear the same. So that's a quick overview of how you can apply formatting to display dates and times, and an introduction to doing the same thing for numbers to improve the overall appearance of forms and to condense to condense columns or other controls so that you can fit more information in a smaller amount of time and still have it display adequately. In the later video, we'll take a look at how we use these same formats in reports, and we can use that for grouping and summarizing.